Good evening and welcome to Common Ground on the Hill, a Maryland Folklife Center in residence since 1994 on the campus of McDaniel College in Westminster, Maryland. And my name is Walt Michael. I'm the founder and executive director of Common Ground on the Hill. This evening's keynote is one of 3 keynotes presented during Traditions Weeks and will live on the Common Ground on the Hill official YouTube channel for your future enjoyment and reference. Before beginning tonight's keynote, I am pleased to introduce to you the 10th president of McDaniel College, Dr. Julia Jasken. President Jasken, while serving as provost, moved Common Ground on the Hill's offices to the historic Dean's Cottage. This profound support by our new president marks the beginning of the second quarter of a century of our work and our relationship with McDaniel College. Please make welcome President Julia Jasken.
Thanks, Walt, and thank you all for joining us this evening for this last keynote in our Traditions Week. A special thank you to my dear friend, the talented and visionary Walt Michael, for his work as executive director, and congratulations to Common Ground on the Hill for celebrating its 27th annual Traditions Week. Traditions Weeks have been such an important part of our campus community since they launched in the summer of 1995. Common Ground on the Hill was founded by and composed of McDaniel graduates who were inspired by McDaniel faculty and administrators during their student days in the 1960s. In particular, they were especially influenced by the wonderful Ira Zepp and Del Palmer and had the strong support of President Bob Chambers in their founding. It has been a great way to bring everyone together over the years, to learn together and to bond over mutual interests. Originally entitled Traditions Black and White, it was later retitled Traditions Native American Black and White. Ensuing years brought even more diverse cultures into the work. Common Ground on the Hill knew that Black Lives Matter a quarter of a century before we engaged in this work seriously as a nation. I'm also proud of the steps the college has taken, especially over this past year, to ensure that McDaniel is the most welcoming, equitable, and inclusive community possible. This will remain one of my top priorities throughout my presidency. As an example, my colleagues and I recently worked with our Board of Trustees to approve a resolution in support of Black Lives Matter, which reads, "Be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of McDaniel College that Black Lives Matter, that our college fully supports equity for and the inclusion of Black lives, and that on campus and in campus publications, our college must support and promote Black Lives Matter as a phrase as part of our anti-racist mission and our first principles." This summer, there are 3 Traditions Weeks in virtual format. The program reaches not only our local regional participants, but also people throughout the world. I would like to give special thanks to the keynote speakers from the first 2 events, Anna C. Velasquez and Patricia Rodriguez, as well as Dr. Richard Smith. I am pleased to welcome tonight's keynote speakers, all of whom are graduates of the college. Acclaimed educators David Carrasco, 27, of Harvard University, and Don and Ellen Elmes, both class of 69 of Southwest Virginia Community College. Again, thank you for all being here tonight and for allowing me to be part of this wonderful tradition.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. And we're pleased to be here once again on the campus, although we're not on the campus. We're on the virtual campus right now. Excuse me. And we look forward to being back in person next summer. Tonight's keynote is being delivered by Dr. David Carrasco. David Carrasco is a man of our time, a man of enormous vitality and value. So says Carlos de Escasa, the ambassador of Mexico. Carrasco, who holds the inaugural Neil L. Rudenstein Professor of the Study of Latin America at Harvard University, with a joint appointment at the Harvard Divinity School and in the Department of Anthropology of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Carrasco is an award-winning author and editor and has received outstanding teaching awards from both the University of Colorado and Harvard University. Carrasco's creative work in the history of religions has been lauded for its existential oomph, which has resulted in the celebrated Cave, City, and Eagle's Nest Gold Medal from Publishers of the West and City of Sacrifice lauded by Carlos Fuentes as brilliant, provocative, timely, and eternal work. He is a leading interpreter of Latina cultures and the executive co-producer of the film Alambistra, the director's cut, which puts a human face on the ordeal of undocumented immigration into the United States. Dr. Carrasco lectures widely in the United States and abroad and was awarded the Mexican Order of the Aztec Eagle for his contributions to understanding the history and cultures of Mexico. A 1967 graduate of right here, Western Maryland, now McDaniel College, David went on to study at the Chicago Theological Seminary and subsequently served as faculty at the University of Colorado and Princeton University before his current work at Harvard. David's mentor and inspiration at McDaniel was Ira G. Zepp, who served as Dean of the Chapel and Professor of Religious Studies. Zepp, a Kingian scholar and author of The Search for the Beloved Community, had immense impact upon generations of McDaniel students. David was crucial in the formulation and publication of Ira Zepp's Pedagogy of the Heart, a profound book about teaching, a teacher's credo, if you will. We acknowledge and thank the Zepp family for allowing us access to this book, which, along with James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, is central to the graduate studies at curriculum here at Traditions Weeks. Featured as well in this evening's keynote are Western Maryland McDaniel graduates Ellen and Don Elmes, who, after serving in the Student Opportunity Service, moved to Southern Appalachia to begin their 50-year sojourn in art and education. Ellen Elmes is a retired teacher of art history and appreciation, as well as drawing and painting studio classes at Southwest Virginia Community College. As a professional artist, Ellen is known for her imaginative watercolors and visual renderings of community stories in acrylic murals. Her watercolors are widely exhibited in the Central Appalachians, where she and her husband Don live, and her murals are in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Virginia, as well as other collaborative community-created murals in Florida, Tennessee, Virginia, and at the Allenton Peace Center in Scotland. Ellen's most recent outdoor mural is Passing the Torch, commissioned by the Centennial Suffrage Celebration Coalition of Johnson City to honor the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Ellen has recently published a book about her work, as it has been inspired by living in the Appalachian Mountains, Appalachian Labyrinth, painting to the center. Don Elmes has been exploring his environment through his camera lens for over 40 years. Don merges his skills in photography and computer graphic design to complement Ellen's artwork and writing. He has prepared the digital imagery of 2 mural designs for large-scale reproduction and installation. As office manager at the Appalachian Art Center in Richlands, Virginia, he prepared imagery for publication and website construction. As a teacher and crafter of matting and picture framing, Don has provided classes, seminars, and workshops for regional artists and students, helping to bring public art to communities throughout Appalachia. I am very excited about tonight's keynote and would like to welcome at this moment Dr. David Carrasco from Harvard University.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right. So thank you very much, Walt. It's it's a tremendous thing to be here with 3 of my college classmates, all who've done tremendously creative work in times of peril. And I'm particularly pleased to share this keynote with Ellen and Don Elmes. But first of all, I want to congratulate President Jasken in taking over the reins of this beloved college. I think this appointment is wonderful for the college. I think it's very much supported and applauded by the alumni, and I'm very pleased to be on this program with you, and I want you to know that I'm looking forward to working with you and the college in the future on a project that I will talk about at the end of this evening's event. One of the things I always liked about then Western Maryland College and now McDaniel was the motto of the college. I wonder how many of you know what the motto of the college is. The motto of the college is it's a Latin phrase that goes, E tenebris in lucem voco. E tenebris in lucem voco. And it means, I call you out of darkness into light. I call you out of darkness into light. Now, I really liked this motto, this statement about what the education on the Hill was about. Matter of fact, I like it better than the motto of the college I teach at now, which is Harvard University. Harvard's motto is veritas, truth. And the problem with that, and what a lot of us feel about that motto, is it doesn't really acknowledge falsehood and lies. But when you have a motto that says, I call you out of darkness into light, it raises for us three questions that relate to what we're about here this evening. The first is the phrase, I call, to be called. At one time, this college had a very strong relationship with the Methodist Church. And perhaps that's why this particular motto was given, because anybody associated with the Protestant Church knows that one of the key ideas in the life of a Methodist is the notion of being called. You're called to your vocation. And the first question is, for those of you who think about this, is who is doing the calling? Who is calling us? Or what is calling us? One of the things that phrase absolutely affirms, which is crucial to this college, is that there's a relationship, that the student who comes to this college, the student who participates in Common Ground, has a relationship with whoever, whatever is calling us. So that's the first question. Who's calling you? Who do you hear calling you? Is it God? Is it people in travail? Is it the knowledge that sits up here on that hill, is stirring to be shared with you? Think about that. The second thing that stands out to me about this motto is the notion of the darkness. I call you out of darkness. Now, you see, what I like about this is it acknowledges that there's darkness. It doesn't just talk about light. It acknowledges that there's darkness, that there's obscurity, that there's vagueness, that there may be danger. And I think that's very important, because any education and any Common Ground summer, as we all know, that's worth its life, will deal with the fact and acknowledge, as we're going to do tonight in our three presentations, that there's terrible darkness in this country. There's terrible darkness in this culture. And that darkness periodically threatens to put us all in the dark. But then the third question is, what do we do when we get some light? When we are called out of the darkness, what do we do with our light? Do we just spend the lives that we have trying to become wealthier, trying to a bit higher on the ladder, trying to hurt other people? What do you do with this light? And tonight we're going to talk about all of this. Each of us had a calling. We are aware of this darkness, and we have been the recipients of the light from this college, from the communities we've lived in, from the people we have taught, who have taught us. And we're going to share with you is specifically in these marvelous paintings that Ellen Elmes has created, and Don Elmes has been able to reproduce so they can be shared in other places. We're going to share with you some of this light and show you what it means to not only be called, but to call to others. And so it's with this sort of preamble in mind that I want to share with you my presentation that leads into an introduction of Ellen Elmes and Don Elmes and what they have to say about being called out of the darkness into the light. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Hold on here, my PowerPoint went away. It's still not with me here, hold on. So give me a minute here, Walt. It was up here.
We have all been with you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let me put it down here. Okay, let's see here. Where's your guy here to help me with this?
What's going on?
So I can't, I'm trying to share my screen. And when I share my screen, the PowerPoint that I've created doesn't come up here. Hold on.
You have to go into presentation mode for the PowerPoint after you share your screen.
So where's the presentation mode?
So click on share screen.
Yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't come up here. I've got it on my screen, but it's not showing up. In other words, I can see it on my screen, but I can't see it when I go to the presentation mode. Or is there another way to get it?
So you're gonna have to share your entire screen. So desktop 1 is what you're gonna want to select. And then you're just gonna click into it as you would a normal PowerPoint.
Okay, what do you mean desktop 1?
So click share screen down in the bottom.
Yeah.
And it should pop up, and in the top left corner, the selection should say desktop 1, whiteboard, iPhone, iPad via airplane, iPhone/iPad via cable.
Yeah, it's not saying any of that. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. My presentation is called Saying the Mexican Names. I just want to give you a little bit about my background. What you're looking at here is the desert. This is El Paso, and that's Juarez in the background. I come from several generations of school teachers, Mexican school teachers. My grandfather, Miguel Carrasco, built a school right on this campus. This is the American Smelting and Refining Company, and he built a school there in the 1930s for Mexicans to learn the trades. And that school existed for several decades and trained several generations of Mexican students on how to learn certain trades, auto mechanics, carpentry, electrician, and others. And as a result of that, he became a revered teacher in the town. And one of the things that I grew up with and his influence was that education was not only about gathering new knowledge and new skills, it also had to do with becoming a better citizen of the community that you were a part of. And it always impressed me that education had to do with social engagement and citizenship. Here you see my grandparents. That's Miguel Carrasco in the back, and that's my grandmother, Carlota Carranza Carrasco, who came from the Copper Canyon in Mexico, from a town called Patopilas. It was a silver mining town at the bottom of the Copper Canyon. And she came across the border during the Mexican Revolution, met my grandfather, and they had 3 sons, but she was very religious. She was always in the church, and when she wasn't in the church, she started a church. When I was young, the grandchildren, we always loved to be around her. And we were always impressed with her skin because she had very dark skin, but she always kept good care of her skin. It was beautiful skin. And I remember one time we asked her, Abuela, how come you have such beautiful skin? And she said she had a secret ingredient. And that really fascinated us grandchildren. So we said, well, what's the secret ingredient? And she said, well, if you come closer, I'll whisper it to you. I said, my secret ingredient, she said, is prayer, 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 and good cosmetics. And that really impressed us. And I've always liked that line because, number one, it gets back to what I said before, that there was a prayer to some other being who was prior to you, who you had a relationship with, that was calling you to participate in the world. But the good cosmetics was important too, because it had to do with later in my life, I thought about it in terms of cosmology and techniques, and how to organize your world, put on your face in order to meet other faces and get to know these people. And you're going to see a number of these faces of the people who were killed in El Paso in a few minutes when you see Ellen's paintings. My father came from El Paso, spent part of his youth in Mexico. There you see him in the middle. He was a basketball player. He played for the national Mexican team. But what's important for you to know in terms of my calling and my sense of darkness and the light is my father was the first basketball coach in the nation's capital to integrate a basketball team. As a matter of fact, at that time, Georgetown, George Washington, Maryland, all of those teams were only white. They only allowed white people to play. But a Mexican-American coach came. You see him there on the left. A brown man came, and he went into the communities of the blacks, and he's persuaded the families of these black basketball players to put them on the line at American University. And they became the first team in the nation's capital to have this type of integrated team. So I grew up, by the time I was 10, I was a part of this and watching this. And there you see a mural in honor of my father, who founded the Job Corps in El Paso. It's now named the David Carrasco Job Corps Center. That's my 97-year-old mother there in front of it. And so this is part of the background that I bring to this story tonight about saying the Mexican names. And I want to partially read you this story that leads to Ellen's paintings. When I was 7 years old, my father drove me across South Texas from Dallas to El Paso. My mother was waiting for us at my grandparents' home, and I was thrilled to have this special time with Big Dave. On our second day around noon, we stopped at a roadside diner in the desert. But before we went in, my father said to me, when we go into this diner, we have to keep quiet and sit at the counter and not one of the booths. Do you know why? And I said, no. He said, because we're Mexicans and some of these places won't let us inside. He continued, if we get in without a problem, we sit at the counter so we can see them make the food we order. Do you know why? He asked, teaching me. No, I said, why? Because sometimes they'll put sharp pieces of glass in the food to cut our mouths and drive us away. We went in and sat at the counter and ordered. I nudged as close to my father as I could without slipping off the stool. We watched every move the Anglo waitress made, preparing the ham sandwiches and soup. And I remember feeling the hair stand up on the back of my neck when she placed the food before us. My father stealthily looked inside the sandwiches before signaling we could eat. But behind the counter was a green sign that I was to see many times in Texas. Then it was reserved the right to refuse service to anyone, or we serve whites only. Halfway through the lunch, I looked down the counter and saw on the side wall another sign. It had the outline of a gun on it above the words, no dogs or Mexicans allowed, something like this. Years later, on August the 3rd, 2019, another man drove for 10 hours through the night on the same road that my father and I had taken, now a 4-lane highway heading to El Paso. He was on a mission, not to put glass in the mouths of Mexicans, but to fire bullets into their bodies and drive them and others from this country. He arrived in El Paso and went to the Cielo Vista shopping mall a few miles from my mother's house. that is where there is this huge Walmart. And that day, over 1,000 people, mainly Mexican Americans, were shopping, some for back-to-school supplies. The killer first entered the store to investigate the crowd. He returned to his vehicle to put on protective earmuffs and safety glasses, and then grabbed his high-powered assault-style rifle. Outside in the front of the store, a youth girls' soccer fundraiser was underway in the morning light. Young girls with family members had gathered to greet passersby, served chicharrones and cold drinks, and asked for support. Seeing that many in the group were Hispanics, the shooter opened fire. Jorge Calvillo Garcia, a 61-year-old Mexican national, was one of the first to be killed. Jorge had come across the border from Juarez earlier that morning to visit his son's El Paso family and support his granddaughter, Emily. He threw himself in front of the girls at the attack and was cut down. Juan de Diego Velázquez Chiares, a pastor from Juarez, was also killed in the parking lot. Screams and moans filled the air. Shooter, tiros, vámonos went up and the people crouched down, hid, and ran. Once the killer entered the store, he began to pick off Mexicans in his range of vision. He shot at us individually, trying to get us individually, said Maribel Latin from her hospital bed. Then he came walking toward us to make sure we all got shot again and killed. All I could say was, God, please take care of my children, and please don't let him do anything to my daughter. David Johnson, one of the two non-Hispanics killed in the attack, stepped in front of his wife and 9-year-old daughter as the shooter cut them down from a few feet away. Arturo Benavides, a 59-year-old Army veteran and bus driver for San Metro and El Paso, was in the self-checkout line while his wife Patricia was in the restroom. She made it safely out of the store later, but the killer shot Arturo to death in the front of the store. He killed the 86-year-old Angie Silva Englesby, mother of 6 and grandmother of 21, in the checkout line. I won't read all of the rest of this because it's really too hard to hear, too much darkness here. I'll just show you a few more slides that leads up to really the point I was trying to make here. He killed a 15-year-old boy named Javier Rodriguez and many others. He shot anyone who looked Hispanic, regardless of their age. 17 were 56 or older, 2 were in their 40s, 2 in their 20s. And there was a couple who had their baby with them. Both of them were murdered trying to shield the baby. One witness said the killer avoided blacks and whites. And while that may be true, at least one African-American, Chris Grant, was terribly wounded. Alexander Gerhard Hoffman, a German national living in Juarez, was among the slaughtered. The assassin, stone-faced, later told police his intention was, quote, to kill as many Mexicans as possible. Before the attack, the killer had uploaded his manifesto. This is part of the darkness I'm talking about. It was called An Inconvenient Truth onto the 8chan message board, known to be favored by white supremacists. In it, he railed against race mixers, claiming that the US should be split into territories based on race. Quote, I support the Christ Church shooter and his manifesto. This attack, my attack in El Paso, is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. 4 months earlier, a white supremacist shooter at Christ Church had invaded 2 mosques in New Zealand, killing 51 people because quote, white people were being replaced by foreigners. The killing action on that August 13th, 2019 stretched out for months. As one victim, Guillermo Gomez, died 8 months later on April 26, 2020. What mattered the most to the killer was their ethnicity. The news report said that among the dead were 13 Americans, 8 Mexicans, and 1 German. But when we read and say the names, we realize that 12 of the 13 Americans were Mexicans. Mexican Americans or Mexicans, and that is why they were killed. My purpose in telling this story 1 year, almost 2 years on from this latest atrocity, is to invite you to say the names. Speak out loud the Mexican names. In our time when the names of African American victims of police violence have powerfully raised our national consciousness about racism and hatred toward people of color, take heed of these Mexicans and other names of the people in the El Paso attack. This past Christmas, actually, no, 2 Christmases ago, I visited the Cielo Vista Walmart to see the Grand Candela, a 30-foot tall golden obelisk monument in honor of the people killed at the Walmart. The monument is located on the same highway that my father and I traveled into El Paso so many years ago. I was disappointed that there was no plaque with a list of all the names of those killed. And after talking with a Mexican American guard, who happened to speak of admiration of my father's El Paso work with Mexican American youth and poverty, I stood for a few moments in silence. I pulled out the list of names from my pocket and whispered them to myself. But as I said the names, a pain slowly arose in my tongue, as though one of those sharp pieces of glass my father warned me about so many years ago, but somehow lodged in my mouth to drive me into silence. I took the pain and continued saying the Mexican names. This piece that I just read to you was published in the Harvard Divinity School. And fortunately, it fell in before the eyes of Ellen Elmes, a college mate of mine who you're going to hear from in a minute. Up in her Appalachian house on the top of this mountain where she lives, she was moved by this, and she'll tell you about that. And she took a number of days, 23 days or so, and painted portraits of the 23 people who were killed in El Paso. Not only a way of saying their names, but to bring back the images of these people who had been destroyed on that terrible August morning. And Ellen, did this work. She wasn't asking for recognition. She wasn't asking for money. She wanted to see if these paintings could be given as gifts to the families of the grieved, people who had lost their loved ones. I got in touch with people I knew in El Paso. We got in touch with the mayor, the district attorney who worked with these, and they were tremendously moved by Ellen's gesture and her genius. And as a result of this relationship that we formed, we were able to get these paintings delivered to these family members around Christmas of last year. And as a result of that, a new project, the Healing Garden, in part, is being set up that I'll talk about later at the end of this at this keynote presentation that the 3 of us are making. And so all I want to do now is step back and pass the story on to Ellen Elmes, whose response took my essay and turned it into something of coming out of the darkness into the light and sharing that light with the people of El Paso, who are now looking in various venues at images and copies of these paintings. So thank you very much for your attention. And let me pass as we say in Spanish, la palabra to Ellen Elmes. Ellen, it's wonderful to see you. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It's wonderful to be with you and Walt. Both Don and I are so pleased and honored, and also add our congratulations to you, Dr. Jasken, for your presidency. And we're very excited about what's to come in your hands and leadership. It's kind of difficult to follow what David just presented to us. It's brought back what first moved me so much upon reading his essay months ago. But before I talk more about what developed in my attempt at doing the paintings of portraits of people, I want to give you all just a little background on where Don and I are coming from as artists and longtime residents of Jewel Ridge in the southwestern tip of Virginia, bordering on McDowell County, West Virginia. And I'd like to do this because in retrospect, the connection that has happened between us and David and some of his colleagues at Harvard Divinity School, and then most of all, getting to know some of the leaders and families in El Paso has been remarkable. A connection coming from where we are, which seems so removed from El Paso. But what's turned out from this project is the realization that we're not removed. We're all on common ground. So I'd like to go to a couple of slides. And you can see in this first slide of images from some of the murals that I've painted over the years, that many of them are inspired by the pride of place and people here at home. They honor the people who have long labored in the coal-rich underbelly of our mountains and worked in the rolling pasture lands of family farms. Ours is very much a rural area in which many families have resided for generations. We've lived here almost 50 years in the Central Appalachians, and for many of those years, since 1980, I've made my living as a mural painter, both in our region and beyond, and on my own and with Don by my side. Through the process of making these murals and researching their stories, I've learned so much about the ebb and flow of community over time, what makes or breaks its harmony, how the outmigration of youth and the spiraling down of a single economy changes the dynamics of that pride and trust in the possibilities of home. I think some of my most meaningful experiences as a muralist and teacher have come from the community designed and created painted murals I've supervised with my community college students and worked alongside of them, as well as community volunteers and young children on occasion. In working with these kids from elementary to college level, I've seen the power of mural making as a team to jumpstart latent self-confidence and ambition in young people with talent, or in kids with simply a previously unrealized love of creating something substantial and lasting for their school or their town or their YMCA. The pride of place in our mountains comes from the abundance of natural beauty we enjoy. And the state of Virginia has chosen in recent decades to market this treasure of our region as a draw for tourism. So when the Virginia is for Lovers motto was the motive for artists all over the state to be commissioned to link the love brand to places of natural and historic sites, I had the pleasure of being commissioned to paint the wildlife of flora and fauna on this love sign in the Breaks Interstate Park that spans Virginia and Kentucky. This brings me to these thoughts and back to the story of becoming connected to the people in El Paso. To me, love, in the sense of agape love, is the wellspring of creative expression in community. Ira Zepp, who has already been mentioned by several of us tonight, out of our love and memory for him, and who is depicted in the picture you see below here, was a beloved McDaniel teacher and a mentor and friend, as you know now, of David, Walt, and Don and I, among many others. He described in one of his books the agape of teaching as seeking to affirm and validate the other. I believe what the people of El Paso are attempting to do this summer by creating a healing garden and activating a month of healing and unity to honor and remember their loved ones killed by gun violence is exactly that, growing in its embrace by the spirit of agape. How remarkably that spirit has emerged from the heartbreak of El Paso murders was expressed last week in El Paso Mayor Samaniego's words, quote, "Only in unity can we bring out the best in humanity and overcome the hatred in our society that led to this horrible act." So I would like to turn now to my project of painting 23 portraits of the El Paso massacre victims that led us to become connected to some of the families and leaders of the agape spirit of community there. I was deeply moved by David's remembering of the victims and compassionate perspective as a Mexican American himself on the tragedy. His words brought me to the point of realizing my desire to paint portraits of each of the 23 people murdered. Not knowing, though, when I began painting, if I could make such a project a reality and bring it to completion, I started painting one portrait a day, each on a 9-inch by 12-inch canvas throughout the month of October 2020. Painting the portraits became kind of a daily mantra for me, choosing the colors and photograph to work from for each person, recreating as much as possible a kind of visual vitality in paint to honor their life on Earth. Initially, I looked up online pictures and information, whatever I could find, about each person, and that is what hooked me into doing the paintings. They became real people. And spinning off of the importance of knowing and remembering their names, as David so eloquently wrote about, I decided to look up a legendary or mythological or cultural meaning of each name and incorporate that into each painting. Fortunately, Don and I together were able to literally wrap up and package my other goal of creating the portraits by getting the appropriate addresses of the victims' families with the help of leaders in El Paso and staff at the Harvard Divinity School, and mailing each portrait as a gift to a family member of each of the victims. Since the murders, leaders of the city of El Paso have been constructing a healing garden to honor the victims and encourage community and unity with one another. The garden will be dedicated on the 2nd anniversary of the tragedy next month on August 3rd, and we are all planning to be there for it. I'd like to go back to slides now. So, how did I feel as I painted each portrait? I felt like I was meeting a new friend, enjoying their company during the day as I tried to bring each face into the light of recognition. I imagined uplifting experiences they had engaged in their lives, possibly, as I painted the twinkle of an eye, and envisioned challenges that brought them down when rendering the lines in a furrowed brow. Through my initial research online, and through the portal of painting, I came to know their faces and aspects of their stories that in the end enabled me to recognize myself in them. Here are some of the ways I feel connected to 23 people I now remember in terms of how they lived, not how they died. My husband, Don, and I, now married 52 years, share the gift of long years together enjoyed by Maria and Raul Flores. And by Sarita Regalado and Adolfo Hernandez. We also still remember the romance of young love that we imagine Jordan and Andre Anchando held in their hearts during their first year of marriage. As did Maribel Hernandez Loya, when her husband, Leonardo Campos, delighted in regularly gifting her with flowers. As parents and grandparents, Don and I know the pride and love with which we embrace our children and grandchildren, the same love and pride that motivated Memo Garcia and Jorge Calvilla Garcia to help their children and their grandchildren to sell snacks in front of Walmart that day to raise money for the El Paso Fusion girls soccer team, ultimately giving their lives to protect their beloved children. It is that same love and pride held in the hearts today of the parents and family of another young soccer player, Javier Rodriguez, whose enterprising spirit led him to Walmart's branch bank to open a checking and savings account on August 3rd, 2019. I am the granddaughter of a woman widowed early in life and have heard from my mom the struggles that her mother faced as a single mother. So I admire the perseverance and success of Angelina Silva Anglesby and Margie Ricard in rearing their large families with limited money and resources. As I respect the devotion of Maria Eugenia Legarato Roth to making a loving home for her children. And I am moved by the determination and long-term efforts of Gloria Irma Marquez to legally reunite with her daughter in Mexico on US soil, which she spent 13 years attempting to do, which sadly didn't happen until Gloria's funeral. Being an artist myself, blessed to be able to use my skills over many years in a community I love, I celebrate the hardworking dedication of David Alva Johnson to his career as a contractor, the creative vision of Luis Alfonso Juarez realized in his renowned architectural ironwork, and the innovative spirit of Ivan Filiberto Manzano funneled into his entrepreneurial marketing firm, and the years of community service and friendly smiles given by Arturo Benavides to the passengers of his Metro Transit bus line. Through my experience of teaching art to community college students for 20 years, and as an elementary school artist in residence teaching young children for 4 years, I can relate in my heart to biology teacher Teresa Sanchez and Elsa Mendoza de la Mara Marquez, whose life's passion was educating children. And as a transplant from a suburban childhood in northern New Jersey to the rural mountain terrain of West Virginia and southwestern Virginia, where I've resided my entire adult life, I understand the allegiance and love German-born Alexander Gerhard Huffman held for his adopted land of Mexico. And I fully relate to the deep caring felt by Juan de Dios Velázquez and his wife for their families on both sides of the border. With the help of David and his amazing assistant, Charlene Higby, as well as the trust in us given by El Paso Judge Samaniego and District Attorney Esparza by providing addresses, the 23 portraits were delivered to the victimized family members on Christmas Eve of last year. What followed in the beginning of 2021 was a flow of letters and emails sent to us and to David from the loving families of those killed in gratitude for the portraits. I'd like to share with you a few of their statements. From the daughters of Cerrito Regalado and Adolfo Hernandez. These have been difficult months. Trying to be strong and accept what happened, there is a great pain in our hearts, which despite being broken, continue to beat and fight to be happy. And you're right, one has no idea how the other feels unless it's in their shoes. Believe me, this double pain overwhelmed us, but we are learning from it and what life wants from us after this. My parents, two beings of light and love, a great example to follow, always with the right advice, with an attitude of listening, at the service of all, and with that expression on their faces that you very well projected in your paintings. I miss their gaze so much. You are sending me something of that when I see your paintings, I feel their presence. From the wife of Arturo Benavides, all this love and support has helped me cope with my loss. From the daughter of Luis Juarez, you captured the kindness in his eyes. Cruz Velázquez, the eldest son of Juan de Dios Velázquez, said these compelling words of grace at his father's funeral. I hope El Paso rises in forgiveness, in grace, in resilience, so that we may become stronger as a community, so that we can become stronger and form the ties we need to as a community that is Hispanic, Latino, Anglo, and other cultures. There is no room for resentment and grudges. This must strengthen us as a Hispanic community. We must all be strengthened and realize that there is no one race that is better than the other. Under the Constitution of the United States, we are all the same. We are all equal. That is our flag, and we must uphold justice and respect for human life and families. In conclusion, I guess this project that started so simply has grown to embrace a multitude, all of us in an effort to recognize each other's kindness, even in the face of pain. It has restored in me a faith in our shared humanity and the truthfulness of Bob Dylan's words, behind every beautiful thing, there's been some kind of pain. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and my paintings, and to share what I am continuing to learn through connecting our ordinary yet extraordinary experiences with one another. Now Don would like to share his perspective.
Hi. Pretty hard to follow these two folks, but I'll do my best. Most of you know me. I'm Ellen's husband, Don, and I want to take just a few minutes, like David and Ellen, to share with you some of my personal thoughts, albeit they more general in nature, about this subject of remembering their names. I want to speak in a very personal way to all of you. I'm 73 years old. I'm a conscientious objector. I've never owned a gun, and I never will. And I've tried my best to live a peaceful life in this turbulent world. But despite my efforts to live peacefully, I have been shot at twice in my life. Once intentionally, years ago, when our bedroom window was blown in while Ellen and I were in the room because someone didn't like our efforts to help a group of children who were trying to gain their right to a high school education. And once unintentionally, when a hunter's bullet passed just 2 inches behind my head as we were driving down the road. It traversed our car as we were passing an interstate ramp just below Sykesville, Maryland, only a few miles from McDaniel College. That bullet would have killed our son, who was strapped into a child's car seat in the back, had he not at that very moment bent over to pick up a balloon that had fallen to the floor of our vehicle. My first job after graduating from McDaniel College was teaching in an elementary school in Panther, West Virginia. Imagine my shock when weeks into the job, while visiting a 4th grader's home, the child we were visiting pulled me aside, emptied bullets from a gun, and gave them and the gun to me, pleading for me to keep the weapon from his father for a few days, fearing something terrible might happen. I own a rural farm, and despite the fact that I posted every year against hunting, I've had to confront armed hunters on my land more than once. I found threatening notes stuffed into my mailbox, written on the back of my ripped off no trespassing signs, and I've seen blood trails in the snow where hunters have dragged their illegally gotten game off of my land into their vehicles. I've also seen my neighbor's dead cow lying in the field, shot by someone too tired or bored to wait for legal game to appear. Once I attended a neighbor's funeral where the deceased parents would have given anything not to have owned the hunting rifle that day, the day when their 19-year-old son, as a result of a fight with his girlfriend, ran into the nearby woods and took his life. On another occasion, I tried to offer support and consolation to a young coworker whose dad, in a depressed state, also chose to end his life and left my coworker and her family bereft to clean his blood from their front porch. Suicides, of course, are tragic for everyone, leaving the family members always wondering if anything different could have been done. With a gun, the act is so simple and lethal and quick. Then there was the time when another coworker's sister had to flee for her life when a former boyfriend, in a rage of jealousy, shot and killed her new boyfriend after forcing their car off the road. And most recently, just months ago, a classmate of ours from this very institution was murdered in her home on the eastern shore of Maryland, the victim of a murder-suicide. For years, I've worked at a community college where students naturally congregate in the cafeteria. Imagine my shock some years ago when I learned that just down the hall from this gathering place, a man had been interviewed and hired to teach there, who the very next day committed multiple murders at a nearby law school. And 5 years later, our faculty sat anxiously for hours, waiting to find out if any of our former students were among the victims of the Virginia Tech massacre. I was heartbroken a few years ago when our son told us about a high school friend of his who had tragically been in the national news when his toddler son had found a loaded gun in their home and accidentally killed himself. I'm a peaceful man who years ago lost his innocence as a teenager when my president was assassinated in a motorcade, and was traumatized again when the leader of a nonviolent movement for equal rights and justice was shot down trying to help men be recognized as men. And yet again, when my president's brother was senselessly gunned down just a few months later. And over the years, there has been a whole parade of remarkable men and women who have stood up for something or just been in the way when the flash of a weapon has done its job. I'm a grandfather now of two beautiful children who might have been murdered had they been living in Newtown just a few years ago. Fortunately, they're too young to know of all the collective mourning that has gone on for years from the repeated acts of terror on our population. Columbine, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Virginia Tech, Northern Illinois University, Fort Hood, Aurora, Colorado, the Sikh Temple in Wisconsin, the Living Church of God meeting in Milwaukee, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Las Vegas Country Music Festival, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and of course, the El Paso Walmart, just to mention a few. These assaults don't include the equally devastating, endless daily shootings in our inner cities, too numerous to make it into the national news. I'm just one person, someone who doesn't even own a gun, who's experienced all of these different traumas. What must it be like for others who actually own weapons, or for those who live in so many communities that experience greater, often daily violence? The gun lobbyists would have us believe that guns don't kill people, people do. And to some extent, they're right. It is people who aim and shoot the weapons, but it also is undeniably and irrefutably the gun, so efficiently lethal and so easy to possess in our country, and so prolific, that does the business of killing. Just 1 week ago, the headline in the news was, at least 150 people fatally shot in more than 400 shootings over the 4th of July weekend. Nationally, on this day, 181 days into this year, there have been 356 mass shootings, 381 people who have been killed, 1,468 people who have been wounded. And all of these victims' families have been forever traumatized. We are talking today and remembering the 23 innocent Mexican and Mexican-American victims that were so senselessly murdered 2 years ago. It is important to remember them and to say their Mexican names. Every time I have handled Ellen's imagery of them, I have treated each individual image with silent respect, honoring the life lost. They were human beings, just like us, with loved ones in their lives and hopes and dreams and accomplishments. One has to ask why such hatred continues to flourish year after year. What is this notion of privilege that excuses thinking of others as less than? Why would anyone, as David described in his essay that so moved us, willfully put glass into another person's sandwich. The El Paso victims' inalienable right to life, expressed in our Declaration of Independence, was ended when someone filled with hate got hold of a gun. If we want a safer place to live, a place where the rights of the innocent are as important as the right to bear arms, we must say their names not only out loud, but to our congressmen, along with the hundreds and hundreds of other victims' names that have been murdered along the way. We must say them over and over and over again until our congressmen listen and do something to stop this senseless killing. We need to join Gabby Giffords and the Parkland Students Movement, March for Our Lives, and the parents of the children of Newtown, and the many other family members of victims in their efforts to pass common sense legislation to make our country a safer place again. We, as a people, have got to do something.
Thank you. I believe that now David Carrasco has some comments.
We call you out of darkness into light is the meaning of this evening's presentations. And then the question becomes, once you get to see some of the light in Ellen's paintings, in Don's narrative and plea, what do you do about it? What are we going to do about it? It seems to me that for many years, the Common Ground on the Hill has been doing just that. It's been, in its own way, responding to the call, acknowledging the terrible darkness, and then bringing light through music and art and the kind of community that it builds. Don and Ellen have joined me, as well as scholars from the El Paso Community College, Harvard Divinity School, DePaul University, University of Texas San Antonio, and I am now hoping that McDaniel College will join in this group that will be represented in El Paso from July 30th through August the 4th to participate in the acknowledgement of what you've just heard and the construction of a healing garden. But our educational group is putting together a 3-year project where we're going to make presentations during Hispanic Heritage Month, hopefully through future Common Ground events, that basically tell the story of the El Paso Juarez killings and the response of the community to create a healing garden, so that that story becomes, in the way that Don just narrated, a national story of bringing light to the darkness. While we're in El Paso, from July 30th to August the 4th, we're going to be participating in 2 events that we have contributed to. And we'd like to see both of these events part of this consortium effort that we hope will include McDaniel College over the future years. The first event is going to take place, it's going to be the showing of a marvelous film called Song for Cesar, which I presented in a rough cut at Common Ground on the Hill 2 years ago. That film has now been completed. It'll probably come out in American Masters. And it is done absolutely in the spirit of Common Ground on the Hill, because it affirms all of the music and art, the poetry, the singing that was galvanized by Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers movement to try to bring justice and decency to the farm workers, Mexican American and Filipino farm workers who were supplying our tables with this food. That film can be made available to many colleges, including Common Ground and McDaniel College during Hispanic Heritage Week. And we can have input to any college that participates in this from the filmmakers themselves. The second event, let me say, at the first event, they're going to be displaying Ellen Elmes' paintings through the wizardry that Don Elmes has created for the mounting of these paintings, that they're going to be driving to El Paso to be shown and shared by the people there. The second event will be the actual commemoration of the Healing Garden. The Healing Garden is a living monument that's been constructed right on the border. It's right exactly on the border in Escarate Park, where I used to take my kids to an amusement park there. And it's this healing garden is made of both trees and flowers and plants, as well as memorials. I've participated, as long as Ellen has, in meetings with the planners of this healing garden. And our purpose is to take this healing garden story, which is all about the borderlands, because you see, Juarez and El Paso were both impacted by this event. So it's cities on both sides of the border. And we're going to take this story of the healing garden and the theme of healing for the next 3 years to as many universities and many settings as we can, along with Song for Cesar, along with Ellen Elmes' paintings, to try to bring people out of the darkness into the light. And so we're hoping that McDaniel will join us in this. So it'll be joining Harvard University, DePaul University, University of Texas, University of Texas, San Antonio, and El Paso Community College, probably Michigan State University, and several others. So that's our hope. That's our presentation. And I know we're scheduled tomorrow at 2:00, is it, Walt? For
4 p.m. and I can speak to that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's our presentation. And I hope that all of you have been as moved as I have been again by both Ellen and Don.
Well, David, thank you so much. And Don and Ellen, thank you. Called from darkness into light. I feel very proud to be part of an institution that asks us to do that. And it is never easy to walk into that light, is it? Because it means confronting things within ourselves and changing. I would like to invite everyone who is hearing this tonight to come to the Search for Common Ground class, where we will have an opportunity to speak with tonight's speakers and some Q&A, and perhaps we just might figure out some more things to do to create some more light in this class. It's the Search for Common Ground class, and it is being made open to the public at 4:00 tomorrow. And the link will be in red on the announcements bar on the Common Ground on the Hill website, commongroundonthehill.org. commongroundonthehill.org. So at 4:00 tomorrow, please show up. I'd like to thank President Jasken for being here tonight and for helping us, and when I say us, I mean the whole McDaniel community, walk into new light. I can see it, I can feel it, and it's just been wonderful to be here this evening with all these great people. Take good care of one another, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Thank you.